Hello dear humans, welcome to volume 2 of my yet to be properly named series. I still have no idea what name to give it officially because spot review was just the best thing I could come up with, and moving on from that, nothing seems to be as good. Let's just go this time with Valencia review, I suppose, since the topic for today is going to be the first part of Valencia. I covered for today 5 areas, and next time I will cover the other 6 ones left in Valencia and again talk about what experience you can expect to make there, skill experience and money per hour. I'm not going to explain again how this series works since I did that in the first volume. I would assume you either watch that or you should watch at least the first 10 minutes of that one to understand everything. And one thing that I forgot to mention last time was first off to show what crystals I have in my gear, if anyone is even interested in that, and to show my knowledge and the fact that I have 10% extra drop rate from my knowledge. That might be somewhat relevant. Now, for today, I decided to extend the test duration to 2 hours per each spot, and I'm more or less going to try to keep it at 2 hours per spot moving on, and that's more or less it. We have Nagas and Bandits, which I tested both with elites and without elites. Then we have Cadry ruins, in exactly the same case, with some elites and then without them. More or less the same rotation, but you will see in a second. Cadry's is basically, in my opinion, the same as Bandits with slight changes. Centaurus, just because why not, put it in this video. Then we have Nagas and Fogans all the way, if I can find it, here. I was mainly interested for today to talk about Fogans, Bandits, and Nagas. Those were the main ones, and then I added 2 more spots just because I could. So that's what we will talk about today. I suppose I could just as well get started. Let's get into the Excel file and talk about each of the areas individually and what was my experience with them. So let's begin with Bandits, just because it's the first one in my Excel file. The first hour spent here, this time I tried as much as I could to spend exactly 1 hour per each test, so with some exceptions all of them will be 60 minutes with a loot scroll per each individual test. And the first hour at Bandits was mainly focused on hunting elites. I chose the main rotation, the one where you can kill at most 9 elites if they are all spawned. I would try to kill all of the elites, and once they were all dead I would just continue killing monsters over and over until my channel cooldown was up, the 15 minutes. Then I would switch channels, hunt elites again, and when I was out of elites I would again proceed to kill only monsters. There was a time when the main rotation was taken because people were doing some guild quests, and I switched to doing the cliffside rotation for one of the servers. Again, I didn't always get to kill the elites. Sometimes there were, let's say, 2 to 3 per channel, other times there were none, other times they were all alive. I didn't keep track of how many I killed, but my main focus for this first hour was elites. I tried to basically maximize the money per hour income and not as much the experience. The result from this was roughly 3,000 monsters killed per hour. I rounded it up to 3,100 because it seemed like the right thing to do, and I got as a result 72 millions per hour as my result from this 1 hour spent here. The money per hour, again I will remind you, it's not going to be very accurate since it's at most 2 hours, but it should give you a general idea of what you can expect here. You will get a lot of blackstones from those elites, you get a lot of a fairly decent amount of dust, you get Kafra drops, scrolls are okay, I got 8 of them in this 1 hour, 1 Iona fragment. Overall I would say it's decent. So 72 millions in this 1 hour with elites, and the experience rates were these, which are pretty underwhelming, but I wasn't expecting too much since elites take a while to kill and you do take a hit in your monster clearing rate. So 3,100 monsters per hour, you will see in a second. Moving on into the second hour at Bandits, for this one I wanted to maximize the experience rate to test that one primarily, and so I went to the cliffside rotation. I'm not sure if I will be able to show everything in terms of clips in the background this time, since I don't want to make this another 40 minutes long video. But basically the cliffside rotation is, in my opinion, the best one at Bandits. It doesn't have any elites in it whatsoever, so your only focus is to basically complete those Marnie stones and kill as many monsters as possible. And from this 1 hour I got about 6,000 monsters per hour as my clearing speed, so basically twice the amount that I got on the previous one when I was hunting elites. The experience rate wasn't exactly doubled, it's decent, but it's still lower than what I was actually expecting to get. Funny enough, it's actually lower than even Ronaros Forest, for example, from Kamasylvia. I will do the spot comparisons when we get into the final chart at the end, but for now experience was pretty underwhelming in my opinion. It kind of shows that Valencia seems to be a little bit outdated compared to the current values in Kamasylvia, and for the money per hour rate I got about 40 millions in this 1 hour, again with a loot scroll. I should note that I kept on having to trash a lot of weapons from my inventory. I kept getting a lot of base weapons as drops, and I don't have the biggest inventory in the game, and this was an issue throughout this entire area. I believe it was also an issue when I was killing elites, but it became more so when I moved on to the cliffside rotation. You get a lot of base weapon drops and they fill your inventory very quickly, and at some point if you want to last 1 hour with a loot scroll, you will have to trash a lot of those base weapons. I basically only kept the ones that were enhanced, say +7, +8, and at the end of the test I extracted all of the blackstones from those weapons, and that was the result. The blackstones this time I only got 22 weapon ones, so a lot less blackstones. I actually didn't get any dust, any chafras, so I believe those mostly come from elites, it seems like. I got a little bit more scrolls, but that's to be expected since I was killing more monsters, and just in general 40 millions didn't seem to be that good. Maybe I had a bad hour, maybe I should say this, the cliffside rotation is worth around 50 millions per hour on average, maybe, but this was my experience here. So that's that for Bandits. Let's move on into Cadry's. Again, the exact same story. The first, I only know one good rotation for Cadry's, and that is basically the one around the gatekeeper that spawns on the pond thingy where there's water, that rotation. There are two ways to do it. Since the respawn rate for monsters at Cadry's was increased, you can either do it the old way, basically killing monsters around the pond and then circling that pool of water and going back. Basically you only have one single elite in that rotation, or you can go upstairs and put 2 more elites in your rotation, making it a 3 elite rotation basically. So for the first hour I did go upstairs. I had 3 elites in this rotation, although I'm not sure if I killed more than 3 of them since they probably didn't have time to respawn. Still, again, exactly 1 hour grinded, about 4,600 monsters per hour killed, rounding it up to what I would expect to be normal. Experience rates were lower than the ones at Bandits, but I should note it was higher than the elite run at Bandits, but lower than the cliffside rotation at Bandits. Still, not exactly overwhelming experience rates. I don't really want to read every one of these numbers individually. I would rather compare all of them at the end of the video. So For now, it's also kind of underwhelming, but I was more or less interested in the money per hour rate for this place, because from my past experience here, it always seemed to be very good just because of those elites. So looking at my inventory, what I had, I can see a lot of blackstones again, even though this area had less elites, only 3 and not possibly 9 like at bandits. Still, I got a lot of blackstones because I got a lot of enhanced weapon drops. Again, the exact same issue as at bandits. With my limited inventory space, I had to trash a lot of the base weapons, and I also had to take these blue ring pieces. Those drop quite a lot, and I had to combine them into this one, the red thingy. Basically, you combine 9 blue pieces into 1 red. Basically, I had to do as much cleanup as possible on my inventory, because I would say this area is one of those where you need a lot of inventory space to properly grind. Out of this, in this 1 hour, I probably had to clear my inventory like 4 or 5 times, as in to trash the base level weapons. There's not a lot of silver loss to trash the weapons. Maybe I lost, let's say, at most 1 million. I would say maybe 500,000 silver, so it's not a lot, but it definitely kills your time to sit there for like 30 seconds to 1 minute just to trash the weapons. My money per hour rate was about 68-69 millions. Let's round it up to 70 from this 3 elite rotation, which is actually pretty good. It more or less compares to what I got at bandits hunting elites, but the experience rate did take a hit. Moving on, we have Cadrys with only 1 elite or no elite. In this second hour, I tried to go for 160 FPS to uncap my game and try to have that 160 FPS to see if it makes me clear faster. It did seem somewhat smoother, the game in general, but I don't think I was clearing faster because of that. I basically increased from 4.6 thousand monsters per hour to about 4.7 thousand monsters per hour. So I would say that increase of 100 something monsters per hour was just because I wasn't killing those extra elites that I may have been killing on the first hour. So that's probably where the increase in clearing speed came from, and not from the uncapped FPS. Nevertheless, this second hour had only one elite in it, which I may or may not have killed, if it was alive, and the results were 58 millions per hour from this 1 hour, and slightly higher experience rates, obviously to be expected, since again I wasn't killing those extra elites. The experience rates were still pretty underwhelming, but the interesting part to me was that I was losing 10 millions per hour, at least from this inventory. I was still getting a lot of blackstones, even though I wasn't killing elites this time, so maybe I just simply had better luck with the enhanced weapon drops. I should note that all of the enhanced weapons were turned into blackstones just because I didn't want to have to deal with the prices of those. I remember I got a plus 15 weapon drop, and even that one, instead of selling to the marketplace, I decided to extract the blackstones out of it. So just to give you a general idea, this is more or less what you can expect out of Cadrys. I would say these days Cadrys is a pretty decent grinding spot, and I personally would rather go here than at the bandits. Mostly because neither of them seem to be that populated these days. People don't really grind bandits and Cadrys as much as they used to, just because Polyforest is that much better, but I would say I prefer Cadrys more just because of the more stable money per hour rate, in my opinion. Maybe it was just my luck. So moving on, let's talk about Centaurus. Here I have again 2 hours with 2 different sessions, but this time I'm just going to combine them because they were exactly the same. There wasn't a difference of elites or no elites. So I have 2 hours, out of which the experience rates, as you can see here in the Excel file, they were basically identical, just because I rounded up the clearing speed to 2.4 thousand for both of them. The first one had 2373 monsters per hour, the second one slightly slower at 2324, so more or less the same clearing speed. I could put on the screen now a screenshot that someone sent me a long time ago on my email with proper rotations that you can make at Centaurus. I personally just grinded the one that I knew and the one that I was used to, which is basically a combination of the first and second rotation. It definitely has more monsters than I need. I don't need all of them, but for my own convenience I just stuck with that rotation. The results: 2,400 monsters killed per hour seems decent enough. Experience rates were very underwhelming, pretty bad, but then again I was expecting that. Marniston experience about the same, even though the base Marniston gives you more experience than at Cadrys and Bandits. You don't get to clear that many monsters, so overall experience rate's pretty bad. The money per hour is what I was actually interested in. On the first hour I managed to actually get 2 Centaur belts. I believe both of them came from opening the bundles, not the bundles, the shattered thingy that you open to have a chance to get a belt. I believe that's where both of them came from. And on the second hour I didn't get any belt drop, but from what I can see I got more scrolls dropped and more crystals, the black magic crystals, which these days are going up in price to around 3.6 millions each. So the first hour 62 millions, the second hour 52 millions, and when I scroll back up to the main chart I believe the average was around 58 millions per hour, which is okay-ish, but it basically puts Centaurus in a very weird spot. This area has pretty bad experience rates, so you're not going to come here for that, and 58 millions per hour is pretty bad considering that you can make more at Bandits, at Cadrys and at other areas. So I can't really recommend Centaurus anymore these days. Maybe if you want to be alone, because literally nobody goes there, but I guess it's an interesting spot to check out if you have the AP for it, which might be 220 plus with a Kutum, but it's not really that good to grind. So let's move on to Fogans. Fogans was one of those areas that I said in the previous video I really wanted to test just to see why people still prefer Fogans over Polyforest. I'm more or less certain after seeing the results that it's just because they were used to the idea that Fogans was the best in the game and they keep recommending Fogans even to this day, but after seeing these 2 hours spent here I would definitely say it's a dead area. I didn't see anyone grinding there in my 2 hours spent there. It basically was deserted, and for good reason. The area is very far out into the desert, you spend a lot of time to go there, and I would say it's not worth it to go that far into the desert. You have to deal with using a camel if you're not bothered by the slow horse speed in the desert. You have to probably sometimes deal with the desert debuff, at least while traveling, and just in general it's a very remote area that doesn't offer enough to justify going all the way there. So again I'm going to combine the first and second hours just because they are basically the exact same rotation, the exact same grinding style, everything, no elites here. So first hour was exactly 60 minutes, the second one was only 58 minutes because night time was about to start, but more or less 2 hours grinded. The clearing speed was slightly faster in the second run. The first one was 5,800 monsters per hour, the second one was 5,900 monsters per hour, so I just rounded both of them to 5,900 monsters per hour as my clearing speed. Experience rates are actually, I guess, interesting. The normal experience seems to be about the same as Bandits, but the skill experience is lower. Again, we can compare experience more clearly at the final chart, but for now experience seems to be decent, but it's definitely a lot lower than the one at Polyforest. At least the skill experience is again about half of what you get at Polyforest, so just because of skill experience alone I can't say Fogans is, you know, good anymore. The money per hour rate was, I got 53 millions on the first hour, 58 millions on the second one. I believe that gets to an average of like 55 millions per hour, which is, I guess, decent. The first hour had 2 setup drops. Again, these are drops, you don't get the shattered thingies to open. I got a lot of scrolls, like 15 scroll drops, which is interesting because I remember back when I did the spot review for this place, it actually had the nerfed scroll drop experience and you would barely get any scrolls, but out of this 1 hour with a loot scroll I got 15 of them, which basically tells me that yeah, you have actually a pretty good drop rate of scrolls here, and it's basically what makes most of your income, just the scrolls and the potential drops of setups. I got 2 Kafras, so you can actually get those here as well. Some shoes which are more or less useless, they don't have that high value on them. And from the second hour I got 3 setups and not 2, so the setup drop seemed to be, the drop rate for setups seems to be pretty high. You know, I had the loot scroll, but still I wasn't expecting more than 1 per hour. So I got 5 of them in 2 hours, which tells me that maybe the reason why they are so cheap these days is because the drop rate is very high. Again, a lot of scrolls, I got 13 of them from the second hour. No Kafras this time, 1 dust, so you can get dust as well I suppose with a very low drop rate, and 2 Iona fragments. Overall, 55 millions per hour is what I would expect to make here with a loot scroll, and for a recommendation I would say don't even bother because the place is way too far out into the desert. And for the last area, the 5th one for today, we have Nagas, which is basically a copy-paste of Fogans, with the difference being that it's closer to the Bazaar city, which means you will have a much easier time to travel to it. You know, you don't have to deal with going through the desert that much, at least if you pick the rotation that is closest to the Bazaar city. Even though this is the last area on my Excel file, it's actually the first one that I tested. So back when I did this first test, I wasn't yet fully committed to do exactly 1 hour per test and about 2 hours per area. So the first hour was actually only 40 minutes grinded, and the second hour was exactly 60 minutes. So this time I have 1 hour and 40 minutes at Nagas. The results are, as I said, basically a copy-paste of Fogans. The experience rate is slightly lower than the one at Fogans, but the skill experience is slightly higher than the one at Fogans. Overall, I would say, again, pretty mediocre experience rates compared to Kamasylvia. Monster clearing rate, I would say if you try, you can clear as many monsters here as you did at Fogans. My first hour, you know, the 40 minutes were again almost 5,800 monsters per hour. The second one, 5,750. So about the same. I just rounded both sessions to 5,900 monsters per hour, just to be the exact same clearing speed as I had at the Fogans. Now, I should note the first session, the first 40 minutes were on the rotation closest to the Bazaar city. I actually had to extend that one a little bit. Basically, I had to include every single monster I could find, even jumping up to 1 rock, which you might see on the screen right now. Basically, I had to use every single monster I could find in that area to actually have all of them respawned at the end of the rotation, and that landed me about 5,800 monsters per hour killed. Now, for the second session, the second hour, I was grinding the node manager rotation, how I call it, basically the big one in the big open area. When you go further out into the desert, you will see it on the screen sometime now, I suppose. And on this second rotation, which I used to basically consider the main rotation for this place, I got 5750 monsters, which is more or less identical to the previous rotation. So I would say as long as I have enough monsters to clear them, without running out of packs, there is no real difference between the two rotations. So you can pick either one of them as long as you have the monsters, respawned. So that's that. The results: the first hour gave me 54 millions and the second hour 49 millions. The first one being only 40 minutes, again I had to basically round it up to what if I would grind 1 hour, but still the average between these two I would say is around 52 millions per hour, which is basically close enough to Fogans. It's about the same as what I expected from Fogans. So experience rates and money per hour rates these days seem to be pretty balanced between Fogans and Nagas. There doesn't seem to be that big of a difference. The scroll drop rates are about the same. I got 8 of them in the first 40 minutes, and only 7 of them actually from the second hour. So maybe the scroll drop rate is actually slightly lower at Nagas, but in return you actually get a decent drop rate for Blackstones. I believe most of them actually came as Blackstone drops, and only a couple of them were from enhanced armor pieces. For example, this +3 here in the first session, that one basically counted it as 3 Blackstones. So that's more or less it for discussions in terms of individual grinding spots. Now let's go all the way back up to the big chart and talk about that one. Before that, I should point out I added this little marketplace price thingy over here, just like I did back when I made the spot reviews, so that I can easily update the prices in the future. And I'm only mentioning this in case you want to download the Excel file. If you play on a different server, if you play on the console version of Black Desert for example, or any other server that isn't the Europe one, you can just download the Excel file and look on the marketplace, on your marketplace, and update all of these values, which in the future will be more. And once you update these, all of the areas tested will automatically update their money per hour rates as well, to show what you should expect on your own server, because prices change. On some servers, for example, scrolls and blackstones might be more expensive or cheaper. In any case, the final money per hour values on all of the areas already include the marketplace tax using a value pack. So if you don't plan to sell anything to the marketplace, you should expect more than what I am showing, but most of us just sell all of the drops, or most of them, to the marketplace with a value pack. Now, talking about the big chart, the one with all of the areas for today, Volume 2, Valencia Part 1. It was supposed to be only 5 areas, but I decided to split bandits and Cadrys into elites and no elites. So this is more or less the summarized version of what I already talked about. For experience rates, I decided to put here 1000%, as if you would want to stack as many experience buffs as you have. All of the scrolls, the combat books, the 500% experience scrolls if you still have those, and so on. And skill experience rate, I have 700%, just because, again, if you want to stack all of those scrolls and you want to get as much skill experience, it seems like a decent number. Looking at those, again, Polyforest is basically on top, and nothing even comes close to it in terms of skill experience. When I said that Fogans, Bandits and Nagas are basically half, I actually meant it. You get at Fogans it was around 12 skill point level ups in with this many buffs. Nagas about 13, the Cadrys 11, 12, depending how many elites you want to kill. Basically nothing even comes close to the 24 I got at Polyforest. So it's still, even after looking at Valencia, I don't think any other spot in Valencia will get more skill experience than this, so I would say in general for now Valencia is basically dead. If you want to grind skill experience, just go to Polyforest because there's nothing else that comes even close to it. For normal experience, it's I guess somewhat of a contest. If you add the Marnie stones to the normal experience and look at the total experience, Polyforest is still at the top just because the mob density at Polyforest is so high. You kill 6.5 thousand monsters in 1 hour, so maybe that's most of the reason. In Valencia the mob density isn't that high, even though you can still get close to 6,000. It's probably not, you understand what I mean. Experience alone, if you add the Marnie stones and normal experience, Polyforest is still the best. But Bandits, Cliffside Rotation, I suppose it's decent for Valencia. Funny enough, at Fogans I got more experience than at the Bandits, so if you're looking for experience alone from Valencia only, Fogans was actually better than Bandits for me. Nagas was about the same as Bandits Cliffside Rotation. Cadry is, you know, falling behind a little bit, but I would only say go to Cadry if you want to be left alone and you want to grind those elites. For money per hour rates, I guess this is where Valencia has some advantage, because on Polyforest I got around 50 millions, while in Valencia if you hunt elites you get 70. Bandits only 40 millions per hour with the Cliffside Rotation is I guess an exception, but for example Centaurus around 60 millions, Fogans and Nagas at least 50 millions. You don't get a lot more than at Polyforest. Maybe I just had bad luck at Polyforest, but still, after looking at today's results, I would say conclusion so far, still go to Polyforest. Don't bother with Valencia unless you don't have the AP or you are closer to Valencia than you are to Polyforest. Say you live in Altnova or you just so happen to be around Valencia when you want to grind your 1 hour for that day. In that case, yes, pick Valencia, but if you have the choice, if you sit in Hydel in the middle of the map and you have to choose between going to Valencia or going to Kamasylvia, just go to Polyforest. So that's going to be it for today. I will see you with part 3, basically volume 3, which will be the rest of the Valencia areas, the other 6 spots left to test. It's going to probably take at least another 1 week, just because it takes a lot of time to make the Excel file for this. Again, it's the same case. I extended this to 2 hours per area tested, and it still takes me more time to make the Excel file than it takes me to actually properly test the areas. So until next time, as always, stay happy, don't forget to smile, don't forget to keep blowing your accessories and weapons and armors in hands as much as you want, and bye bye!